And Dr. Simon, thank you for coming here. We are very honored and we are very pleased to have this conversation with you.
I'm very happy to be with you, Oksana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, I'll start with my first question. So, if I'm not wrong, when you published this book in 1996, there were like no TikToks, no YouTubes where people, sometimes even experts, explain patterns of manipulators' behavior. And I think when I was reading it, what I thought about was probably one of the most important things that your book has done was regaining people believe in themselves, regaining people their self confidence, because while being manipulated, a person is finding it really hard to admit the truth. So, why is it so difficult for us to accept that another person may act not out of pain, as we tend to think, or uh, not out of some trauma, but just a strategy, just a calculation? Why do we tend to think that all people are the same, feel the same, and why are we trying to find some explanations to their behavior?
I think there's one primary reason for that. There are actually a lot of reasons, but the primary reason for that had to do with the dominance of some traditional psychology notions that had been around since the Victorian era, since the days of Sigmund Freud. Um, and those perspectives, those theories, um, made us all believe that most human beings were unaware of their behavior, that they were driven by unconscious motives that arose out of internal struggles and pains and conflicts that they weren't even aware of. And we were taught an awful lot of other things that have some relevance. It's not that these perspectives are just flat out wrong. And they were especially appropriate for the time. But the times have changed. We don't live in the Victorian era, and we don't have a whole lot of people who are mainly driven by a number of irrational and unfounded fears and insecurities. Uh, I like to say in the workshops that I used to do that if there were a slogan or a motto that would describe the cultural climate or the zeitgeist, as the Germans call it, of the time, it would be in that era, don't even think about it. So people were very repressed, and everything that was basically human, all basic human urges and like that, were kept under the surface. Um, and people were struggling with fears and insecurities that were irrational. We don't see cases like Sigmund Freud saw. We don't see cases of what he called hysterical blindness or hysterical paralysis, people who had debilitating physical conditions that had a psychological root. We don't see that anymore. It was rare even then, but we don't see it at all anymore. And I like to also say in my workshops that if there were a motto or a slogan that would best define the cultural climate of our times, it would be like the old Nike commercial used to say, and that is just do it. So instead of people being overly hung up and struggling with all these unconscious fears and insecurities, most of the time today, people are acting the way they're acting because they don't have enough of a conscience to hold them back. They're not, as I say in my workshops, hung up enough to prevent themselves from doing some of the things they do. So the main reason we really kind of adopted that mindset, and we also adopted the belief that perhaps the person doesn't realize what they were doing. This was the mindset for all therapy for years and years. That the job of the therapist was to help people realize. to have insight into the nature of what they were doing and the unconscious motives underneath it. That has relevance with the folks who I describe in my books as more neurotic than character disturbed. But in our day and time, the phenomenon that I label as character disturbance, inadequately formed moral character, decency, integrity, that is the phenomenon of our time. It's much more prevalent and it's a much bigger problem. And disturbed characters, by and large, pretty much know what they're doing. They just don't have the moral foundation to care much about it. And it's a whole different world we're living in, and a whole new approach was necessary. And I have to say, when I first published in the first edition of In Sheep's Clothing, I'd been selling the book at workshops for years before that in a spiral bound edition. But when I first decided to publish in 1996, and I described this phenomenon that we now call gaslighting, this feeling crazy because your gut tells you there's something not right about the person that you're dealing with, and they have you thinking that you're all messed up and that you've got it wrong. And so you start to mistrust your gut and you feel crazy. Um, when I described that in the opening chapters, oh my goodness, my email box exploded. And, without much effort, the book just took on a life of its own because, as you mentioned earlier, people felt validated. They thought, oh my goodness, I'm not crazy after all. Just what I suspected about this person is really true. And guess what? Some so-called expert told me. And so that validates me. I can actually feel okay about what my gut has been telling me all along.
That is so interesting how you're describing this. I haven't thought about how zeitgeist actually not only described some behaviors, but also how it influenced it. And probably now, because we are so like self-centered, we all want to be liked and we all want to be seen. Probably it also changes the way our behavior changes and the way we want this attention, we seek this attention. It's so interesting point of view. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, Oksana, and we should amplify that a bit. There's this relationship between culture and character, and as cultural norms change, and things that were once rare or regarded as outrageous become more commonplace, it has an effect on people's character. And then as more and more character impaired people populate the society, the culture changes even more. It's a very interactive thing. And we've been in a negative, vicious circle now for probably the last 7 or 8 decades.
Thank you very much. In your work in this book, probably not only in this one, but you paid a lot of attention in distinguishing between covert and passive aggression. According to this exact book, it is covert aggression that lies at the heart of most interpersonal manipulations. So, what is this covert aggression, and how is it different from passive aggression?
That's a great question. A lot of my colleagues, as a matter of fact, there's a person that I corresponded with for 2.5 years who just constantly took issue with me about my distinction between the two. But I believe that a clinician can't be really optimally helpful unless we have our assessment clear and unless we have our labels appropriate to the assessment. And passive aggression is just exactly what the label says. It's aggression through passivity. It's aggression that occurs by not doing, like you're really mad at your partner. and you don't want to talk to them. And so you don't. Even though they want to work something out, you're so mad, you don't want to engage. That's fine. But not doing can be a form of aggression. That's passivity. Um, Active aggression, as opposed to passive aggression, means doing something to either overcome someone, hurt someone, dominate someone. That's active aggression. Covert aggression is active aggression that is either so subtle or so undercover that the person that is fighting you isn't readily seen as just plain fighting you, trying to get the better of you, trying to overcome you, trying to dominate you. And so I'm a stickler for terms. Um, Perhaps clinicians are the most egregious of all stripes, whether they're marriage and family counselors or psychologists or psychiatrists or whatever. I find that people in the professions are generally play, unfortunately, a little too fast and loose with terms. Some of them have lost their original meaning. For example, the term acting out has been become synonymous with misbehavior. It's not. It's an entirely different phenomenon. I described that in the book too. I'm a stickler for that. And I think that once we see accurately what's going on in any interaction, we have a better sense of what to do to restore some balance in the relationship and to make things better. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. If I understand it correctly, being passive aggressive means that you you have this emotion and you kind of show it, but you're not too involved. You don't attack. You probably avoid or ignore or something like this. But being covert aggressive means that you can be very nice. You can be very polite. You can seem that you have very good intention, but you have a strategy in your head.
Right. You have a hidden agenda. Yeah, right. A hidden agenda to control and dominate, but you keep it under cover. And that's very active. It requires active calculation. Okay. And being active is not being passive. Yeah.
This hidden agenda, I can understand why one person cannot distinguish that they are dealing with manipulator. I can somehow imagine how it works when a manipulator directs their covert aggression towards one person, but sometimes they manage to trick the whole group of people. And if members of the group, even when they feel something is wrong, but they still do not confront, does this say more about the manipulator himself, his skill, or the group?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, it would be natural to assume that the answer can be a little bit of both. Um, some people have, uh, character is a very broad concept, and many things go into uh, forming a person's character. And character, as I use the term, and once again, I'm a stickler for terms, is that moral or ethical side of our personality. So we all have a personality. We all have a particular way of seeing the world and dealing with the world that is influenced by our backgrounds, our upbringing, our biological predispositions, our temperament. A whole lot of things go into making up the way we tend to operate in the world. But the moral aspect of that, the moral dimension of that, reflects our character. To what degree we have integrated into our personality certain values, certain principles of operation, certain ethics. And in the age of character disturbance, we have a lot of different personality variables that enter into the mix. And some disturbed characters and some covert aggressors have the gift of charm and the gift of charisma. They have developed fairly decent social skill. I have people ask me all the time, how can you have good social skills and be disordered? Oh, you can have great social skill and still be disordered. If you have no principles, right? Or if you have a set of principles that is antagonistic to a healthy relationship. So, yeah, you can be very skilled at some things, and some people are very good at what we call positive impression management. In other words, they can seem desirable, attractive, even magnetic, but not necessarily be good. Okay. Um, then there is the need of the audience that they're playing to. And sometimes we need to believe in people for various reasons. And that has to do sometimes with our backgrounds, and our predispositions. Some people, there's been a great study done on people who tend to be the factor is called accommodation. They always seem to want to accommodate, to be agreeable, and sometimes that turns into being overly deferential. So they always want to give the benefit of the doubt. And so when a good manipulator is at work, creating a very positive impression, they want to go along with it. So it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But it's nothing that um, we shouldn't diminish the influence that some covert manipulators have when they also have the gifts of charm and charisma and good social skill.
Thank you very much. Also, I have a question, but I think that might be the matter of terminology, but I'm still curious because, as far as I know, in the past, narcissists were considered to be those who were like too self-absorbed, self-centered, and at the same time, they were like so self-confident. They were like almost independent. They seemed to be indifferent to opinions of others, but at least that's how they were portrayed. Whereas now narcissists are described, again, maybe it's just the factor of the terminology, but now narcissist is the term that is used for people who are actually most care about what other people think of them, and they can even be vulnerable at the same time. So my question is, can we consider narcissists as character disturbed individuals, and is covert aggression the main driver behind their behavior?
So, as once again, I'm a stickler for the terms, and this concept of narcissism, it has a core. It has a core dimension. But the way we have been conceptualizing narcissism these days is full of flaw. And in the official diagnostic manual that clinicians use, we list the behaviors that are associated basically with one type of narcissistic character. So well, the point I make in all my books, especially my book Character Disturbance, is that character disturbance, like other conditions, exists along a spectrum. Actually, it exists along two spectra, one of type and one of degree. So the answer to your question is that there are different types of narcissists and different degrees of severity of those different types of narcissism. The core remains the same. The core of narcissism is an ego that's way out of balance, an unhealthy ego. Sometimes that occurs as a compensatory kind of thing. And that is the more vulnerable, compensatory, or as I call in my book, the more neurotic type of narcissist. Their MO is different. Their modus operandi is different. Their formative history is usually different. Their manner of interrelating is different. And their prospects for some success in therapy is very, very different. You can actually work with those folks. Then there is another major grouping of narcissists who have such an ego inflation, and it's not a pretense and it's not a compensation. They really do think they are all that and that they're entitled and that they're superior, and they look down on the weak, and they can't wait for their opportunity to demonstrate their superiority and their power and to exercise. That's a very, very different brand of narcissism. It has different roots in biology as well as different formative history. So these days, unfortunately, we paint with this broad brush about narcissist this, narcissist that. And my question is always, what kind of narcissist are you talking about here? and I advise my clinicians who attend my workshops that until you've got all that figured out correctly, you can't intervene well. You can't help make a situation better. So there's a very broad spectrum of narcissism, and some narcissists basically, they're legends in their own minds, and they don't particularly go out to hurt people, and they're not all that destructive in relationships. But the folks that I describe in my book as the aggressive personalities, they are inherently narcissistic, but they go beyond that in that they are determined to dominate, control, get the better of, exploit, use, and abuse. And there are many subtypes of them, and I describe them all in the books too.
Thank you very much. So talking about this category that you mentioned at the end of your answer, those who want to dominate and use and who manipulate to gain what they want. Is that true that some people can read them or like scan them better than some other people? And if so, a part of awareness of covert aggression, what helps them do that? I've heard many speculative theories in popular psychology, again, in mass culture, that say like one of those people may be neurodivergent people who read narcissist or narcissist. I mean, in those terminology that we are talking about, who read manipulators better than others. But I haven't seen any like research data, so I'm not sure if it's relatable. That's why I'm asking you. Are there some people who like naturally read them better?
Yes. I think that there are some people who naturally read them better. And I'm not sure that naturally is the right word to use there exactly, because some people are more trusting of their gut hunches and their intuition. When someone is aggressing against us, it's pretty normal for us to go on the defensive. We sense something. Most of us do. Gavin de Becker wrote a fantastic book years ago called The Gift of Fear. This is when we're in the presence per se of a predator. There's a certain instinctual almost reaction that we have. Maybe the hair stands up on the back of our neck, and we might not be able to label exactly what's going on, but we know we feel uncomfortable. And some people are more trusting of those instincts. They've learned to be more trusting of those instincts. Some people, unfortunately, have learned to mistrust themselves for various reasons. And some people so want to not see the ugly that they just can't see it. So, yes, I think some people are better at reading when someone is basically on the make or on the con or is out in some way to charm or otherwise hoodwink you. Some people are more sensitive to that.
What about psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists? When manipulators, when character disturbed people are their clients, do specialists uh, like immediately see who's in front of them, or does it take time? And if so, how do those individuals, I mean, character disturbed people, how they break characters, how people who are specialists find out who's in front of them?
Boy, well, first of all, you have to know the common tactics, the common behaviors to look for. You know, we are behavioral creatures, and our behaviors give us away. Other things give us away too. Um, there's a great axiom that comes out of the School of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and some of the great hypnotherapists are used to teach in their workshops that basically we can't not communicate. We are creatures of communication, and we say so much many times just with our actions or our expressions, our body language, etc. And a good clinician these days especially has to be astute about those things. Many times in our training, depending on the discipline that you come out of as a professional, many times in our training, we had the advantage of being behind a one-way glass where we could observe an interaction taking place. And it was much easier behind that glass to be objective about what all was transpiring. When you're actually in an encounter with a human being, and they're using their tactics of persuasion and impression management, you can be swayed. It's harder to be objective. So, what I train the folks, or what I used to try to train folks who attended my workshops to do, is to, okay, go ahead and listen. You got to listen, but also take that step back. Pretend like you're looking through the one-way glass and observing the interaction, and ask yourself, what else might be going on here? I wonder why the person said that. I wonder why the person looked this way when they said that. I wonder why when the person says that uh, they hate what they did to their partner, but their affect doesn't show it. Or maybe they even smiled. That doesn't match. Those observations are the clues. And if you're not paying attention to all those things, and if you're not paying attention to all the tactics that manipulators frequently use, then you're going to miss the mark.
So you teach people to analyze, to observe and analyze, and there are books that, I mean, including your book, that also shows which patterns might like tell people who's in front of them. But do you think when character disturbed people, when manipulators find out that this information is now like everywhere, everywhere people wants to get it, I mean, do they change their behavior? Do they adapt to what is clearly now about them? Do their behavior evolve?
Yes, that's a great question. And absolutely, yes. When you're determined to have the upper hand in any relationship or any encounter and to advance yourself at the expense of others, you reinvent yourself. If somebody is on to certain tactics, then you use different ones. If somebody has you read one way, then you put on another face. Yeah, these less than honest characters, all of them, whatever their stripes, are really good at reinventing themselves to serve whatever purpose they have, because their determination, their essential determination, is to gain the advantage in a relationship. And so they'll do whatever they have to do to maintain that.
And you also said that character disturbed people have an underdeveloped or like totally absent conscience. And what is conscience from a scientific point of view?
Yeah. Boy, I speak to a lot of that in my latest book, Essentials for the Journey. I wish that that book were published in Ukraine. It's still available. I mean, you can get it on Amazon, but it's in English. So we don't have a Ukrainian publication of it. But from a scientific perspective, from a psychological perspective, we've always called that our super ego. But to make a long story short about how it develops, along the way in our growth and development and in the forging of our character, we learn certain values and principles of social behavior. And the extent to which we take them into ourselves and we make them a part of ourselves, um, the extent to which we do that helps us form a conscience. And when it comes to the aggressive personalities, this is something I learned how to work with years ago. And it's not work that most clinicians want to do. But when it comes to the aggressive personalities, the core disturbance with them has to do with their abhorrence, their utter distaste for anything that resembles what we call a submission paradigm. There are people who are overly agreeable and subordinate and submit way too easily. And then there are people who are just hell bent to never kowtow to anything, to never back down, to never say, okay, have it your way, to never concede, and to never subordinate or submit to some higher authority. And those folks have a real problem internalizing the values and standards that help make a good conscience. Sometimes folks also lack empathy capacity, either because it wasn't properly nurtured, or it was beaten out of them, or because they just don't have it. That's something the research is telling us that we find it hard to believe. And so when you have this combination of factors, uh, lack of empathy, a detest for subordination, if you have those factors working together, some people form no conscience at all. They don't take in and take to heart any of the rules or standards or principles or values that we want them to take in that would help make them a more decent person. Plus, in our age of character dysfunction, in our materialistic, upside down values world, it pays to be a no-carer. It pays to be a ruthless schmuck. In so many ways, it works for people. So try and convince somebody for whom everything seems to be working, that they really need to change. It's a kind of a pointless exercise many times, and that we owe to our uh, our character disturbed culture.
I also had one question that I was about to ask, but I think you already have answered it. My question was, do cowardly aggressive individuals deceive only others or also themselves? But you already said that they know what they are doing. They know
Well,
what they...
most do. Most do. Remember, I said there's this dimension where some folks are, at least to some degree, as we used to say, neurotic. In other words, they have some conscience and they are driven by some unconscious motives, and they do have some wounds that are influencing their behavior and they just don't know it. There's a spectrum there. And on one side of the continuum are the purely neurotic, and on the other side of the spectrum or the continuum are the purely character disturbed. And there are some people who are somewhere along that continuum. So to the extent that they might have some decency of character and some degree of conscience, and to the extent that they might find certain aspects of themselves disagreeable to their conscience, and therefore they have to be in some kind of denial about them, and then use other what we call defense mechanisms. To that extent, some people might not fully realize what they're doing, but the vast majority do, because these days we have much more character disturbance than neurosis. The neurotics among us are the ones holding everything up. It's the people who have qualms. It's the people who have principles. It's the people who get unnerved when they see injustice. It's the people who are bothered by uh, vulgar or hurtful or strictly self-serving or grandiose behavior. It's those people who are still making society work to the extent that it's working. And they are not so sick psychologically that they're showing up in the doctor's office with a paralysis or a blindness that has no physiological basis. They're not having those kinds of bizarre symptoms.
Wow. Speaking about those who are closer to that end of the spectrum where the character disturbed, if they clearly know what they are doing, like which story do they tell themselves about themselves? Like how they this what is their character inside their heads? Do they really like enjoy being like these bad characters, or they have some explanations like they deserve it, other people are nothing, I'm special so I deserve this treatment? How they explain this to themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we have some fancy terms in psychology for that. We have these two really fancy terms, ego-syntonic and ego-dystonic. And what that basically means is for some people, who they know they are is who they want to be without any qualms. For other people who have some degree of qualms about the way they're acting and the way they approach things and the way they deal with their partners, if any part of their MO is ego dystonic or not compatible with the way they would like to see themselves, or the way they would like to be, then they have some distress about it and they have to rationalize it in their own mind. They have to make excuses, et cetera, et cetera. Or they have to be in denial about it. So it depends. But there are some people who are disturbingly comfortable with being a bad actor. It's not that they're not aware, it's that they don't care to be any different or to do any different. And that presents an entirely different challenge to somebody who's trying to intervene and make things better. And I spent my whole life basically trying to give other fellow clinicians that message, that all the approaches that we were taught are meant for people who care, who knock on your door and who beg for help. They're not meant for the people who are quite content to be the bad actor that they are. Those things that we were taught are worthless in that arena. And so I've spent my entire career developing techniques and frameworks and perspectives that can actually, to at least some degree, help with the problem that we face today.
See what you say. Thank you for this answer, but it makes me think if my next question that I wanted to ask you is like rational after what I've heard, because I wanted to ask if there's some chance to like change them, but again, it makes sense for those who want to change, because I remember in your book you also talked about channeled aggressive people. I'm not
Yes.
sure if I'm translating it right, because I haven't read it in original, so I read it in Ukrainian, and now I'm translating it back to English. So I'm sorry if I use some terminology not properly. So you talked about channeled aggressive people, those who direct their aggression into something that doesn't harm others, and but if it does, there's a certain agreement for it, such as in boxing. So I
Right.
wanted to ask, is it possible to somehow change covert aggressive people by allowing them to show aggression in specific environment for that? But as far as I understand from your previous answer, it's probably right for those who want to change.
Well, there are two factors at work there. One has to do with the motivation. Most of the time, when a clinician is faced with a person like this, they usually don't come in voluntarily. They're usually coming in under some kind of pressure. Either their partner is fed up with them and has insisted that they go into some kind of counseling, or the world has fallen apart. Maybe one of their schemes has gone bad and now they're in a needy position for the first time in their life, or something like that. But generally speaking, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but most often they come in under some kind of pressure. So the motivation is not optimal. And the clinician has to remember that. Um, but there are a lot of variables that enter into the equation. So I will make it short here. It's a challenge to help people with poor motivation to change and with disturbing character traits that prevent them from changing. It's a real challenge to facilitate change, but it's impossible with the techniques that most of us were taught to use. That's the key variable. That's perhaps the most variable. And I want to say that I am so edified. I see a slight beginning of a turnaround culturally. And I get more requests for consultations. I do these consultations over the internet, and my email box is constantly flooded. But I get more requests these days than in years past from character impaired people, people on the character disturbance spectrum who are in midlife, maybe 50s, 60s, some even in their 70s, who have realized what a mess they made of things, how actually alone they are. Things have stopped working for them, and they're not being pressured externally, but are feeling some internal pressure to at least reach out. Maybe their motivation is not optimal, but they at least know that they probably can't keep going like they've been going. Things just aren't working like they were. And I'm happy to say that I get a lot of satisfaction out of helping these folks to be somewhat better people. I'm not saying I'm a miracle worker, but I've got, and besides, I've got my own stuff to deal with. Uh, but that's very edifying. That does happen. Not a lot, but it happens often enough.
Thank you very much. Also, there's a lot of practical things that we can read in your book, how to deal with people, how to recognize them, and how to deal with their manipulations. But what key advice would you give to those who haven't read In Sheep's Clothing yet, but already find themselves dealing with covertly aggressive people?
Number one, trust your gut. Don't buy into all those traditional notions that don't hold much weight today. If something doesn't feel right, pay attention to that. Give it some validation. Reflect upon what doesn't feel right. Ask yourself, what is going on within me that tells me something's not right in the way the person is dealing with me? Pay attention to it. Give it some credibility. Give it some value. That's your best guide as to how to respond and how to set limits and what the reasonable expectations should be for your relationship. That's the number one advice I'd give.
Thank you very much. I also see that Dmitro and Olesya are here. Maybe some of you would like to ask something. If so, turn on your mic, Olesya.
Thanks a lot for your interesting conversation. I have one question, how often do clinicians themselves from your perspective, can be tricked by manipulators and maybe fall under their influence?
Well, that's a great question, and there's a very simple answer to that. All the time. All the time. And the worst part about that is the trauma for the person that forced the issue of coming into counseling. Many times, an aggrieved partner will finally put enough pressure on a covert character to go with them to counseling. And when the therapist doesn't recognize all the impression management that's going on, all the blaming that's going on, and the denial of responsibility, all the misrepresentation, and doesn't appreciate the trauma of that, then the victim is traumatized all over again. We call that either iatrogenic trauma, that's the fancy word, or therapy-induced trauma, where the attempt to get help makes matters worse or makes the person feel worse. And that happens far, far too often because too many of us are inadequately trained. Sad to say. And anybody that's been through that knows that how true that what I just said is.
Thank you very much. I see also Dmitro is here. I'm not sure he wants to ask something. Oh, he probably does. Okay.
Hi. Thank you for your work. I'm currently the combat medic in Special Operation Forces in Ukraine, and I'm deal with a lot of manipulation among the military personnel. So actually, I spent some time to learn the negotiation tactics with such kind of people, and maybe you have something to suggest for me, like what should be the strategies for like how to interact with the people who definitely manipulative, and and they know that they are manipulative. How you can organically, normally have a conversation or negotiations with such people?
Mm-hmm. You know, there are many possible answers to that question, but I think the most sound character answer is to be true to yourself. to be true to your own values, and to stand on those values. And I have to say that in our day and time, that always comes with a cost that we realize we might have to pay to our own disadvantage. Sometimes standing on principle these days really costs people. It's a sad statement, but I think we all inherently know that that is true. But if we're ever going to get out of this mess, if we're ever going to get out of this character disturbance mess, it has to start with us. The world is only going to change one way, because we didn't get here overnight. We did not get here overnight. This happened insidiously, incrementally, over time. This vicious cycle between culture and character, this happened. And the only way to get out of it is one heart at a time, starting with ours. If we're one less character impaired person, the world's automatically a better place. Automatically. And eventually it will become catchy enough. The mistake that we sometimes make is to try and out-manipulate the manipulator, or to respond to them in a way that we can gain some kind of advantage as they're trying to take advantage of us. This never works very well in the end. Playing their game is pretty much a recipe for disaster. So I would say the best advice, even as painful and as costly as it might be, is be true to yourself and to your own values. Be the person that you would like the other person to be. Be that person, and automatically the world's a better place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
For
Thank you, Dr. Simon. Thank you, everyone who was here. So if there's something, Dr. Simon, that maybe you'd like to ask or to add to our conversation, we would be very happy to hear it.
Well, I just want to invite people to come to the blog at drgeorgesimon.com, because all the information and way, way more is available free of charge there. And to avail themselves of all the books. I'm particularly fond of Essentials for the Journey. And I'm getting ready to publish 2 small kind of pocket books on spirituality. I'm hopefully going to be releasing them in September of next year.
So
as well as a brand new edition of In Sheep's Clothing.
So intriguing, so interesting. Thank you very much. Also, I must say that this conversation, which was extremely interesting for me, and thank you for that, will be transcribed and translated into Ukrainian and published in our website, the website of Kunst, our Ukrainian science popular media. So thank you very much, and see you next time.
And my thoughts and prayers are with the people of Ukraine. I have met so many wonderful people, and I also attended a Ukrainian Rite church about it was about 11 years ago now, and I never had such a warm reception. My wife and I both attended. And it was we didn't want to leave. We were invited to the little gathering afterward, and it felt like we knew these people our whole lives. And I thought, this is how a culture needs to be. We barely know our neighbors here, and these people who have never even met us before are inviting us like family. It was wonderful. So my thoughts and prayers are with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those words, especially.
Take care.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.